Hello and welcome to ThePrint. This is Bidisha and you are watching Economics. Let me start with a big number today. $100 trillion. That's how much money the world's governments together owe right now. It's roughly equal to the entire size of the global economy. And according to the International Monetary Fund, by the end of this decade, global public debt could reach 100% of the world's total output. Think about that. The world now owes as much as it earns. So the question is, can countries keep borrowing like this? And where does India fit into this entire picture? A new IMF study tries to answer exactly that. It's called Maximum Sustainable Debt Across Countries, published in October 2025. Four IMF economists used something called the P theory to find out how much debt countries can safely handle. Now, don't worry about the name. P theory simply says that a country's debt isn't only about mathematics, it's also about trust. If investors and citizens trust a government, they lend to it easily and cheaply. If that trust fades, borrowing costs go up fast. So, the key lesson from the IMF's new study is this. A country's fiscal strength depends not just on its income or growth, but on its credibility. The IMF looked at more than 170 countries over 2 decades and found a clear-cut pattern. Rich countries can safely carry more debt, emerging economies can carry less. Poorer countries can carry even lesser. Here's what this means in numbers. For advanced countries, it is about 124% of GDP. For emerging markets, about 76%. Low-income countries, around 57%. India sits at around 81% of GDP, a little above the emerging market average. That's not dangerous, but it means our cushion isn't very thick. Now let's look at India more closely. The good news first. Over 90% of India's government debt is in rupees, and most of it is held by Indian investors. That protects us from sudden shocks if the global financial climate turns rough. But there's also a challenge. Interest payments already take up about 24 to 25% of the union government's total spending. So what does that really mean in simple terms? It means that about 1/4 of every rupee the government spends goes just to pay the interest on existing loans, not to repay the loan itself, just the cost of keeping that debt. Think of it like this. If you have a home loan, the interest you pay each month doesn't reduce your loan amount. It's the price you pay for having borrowed it in the first place. That's what the government pays too, but at a much bigger scale. And that interest bill is now the single biggest item in the budget, bigger than spending on health, education, or even infrastructure. On the other side of the ledger, India's tax revenue is still modest, around 11 to 12% of GDP. When we include all government income, it's about 20%. In richer countries, that number is closer to 30 or 40%. So while India's growth is strong, our ability to raise revenue and to service our debt comfortably remains limited. Here's something the IMF study highlights clearly. A country's safe debt limit is not fixed. It keeps changing. When your economy grows faster than your interest rate, debt is easy to manage. But when growth slows or interest rates rise, the safe limit shrinks. The IMF's analysis shows that even a small 0.5% increase in global interest rates can make emerging economies like India even more vulnerable. We've already seen this happen. In Brazil, when growth slowed between 2014 and 2017, its safe debt limit fell from 114% of GDP to 91% of GDP. The United States also saw its safe level decline once global interest rates rose after the pandemic. The lesson for India is simple. Our comfort zone depends on both our growth rate and our credibility in the eyes of investors. So, what makes a country really credible? Countries that are transparent about their finances, stick to their fiscal goals, and avoid sudden policy shifts pay less to borrow. Because investors feel they can trust them. India has taken steps in that direction. The centre has promised to reduce the fiscal deficit, that's the gap between what the government earns and what it spends, to 5.1% of GDP by the fiscal year 2026. That's a realistic and credible path. But some gaps remain. State finances are uneven and off-budget borrowings. Things like guarantees for public enterprises are not always fully visible. Being open about these numbers builds confidence and actually helps reduce borrowing costs. Because in finance, transparency pays. Now let's be clear. Borrowing isn't bad. Every country borrows. What matters is why it borrows. If debt is used to build roads, invest in clean energy, expand education or healthcare, that's good debt. It creates future income and makes it easier to repay. But if debt is used for short-term subsidies or giveaways that don't really create value, it weakens the balance sheet. It's like taking a loan to pay for a vacation, nice for now, costly later. So the rule is simple. Borrow for growth, not for comfort. The IMF's use of P theory gives us a fresh way to think about public debt. It tells us that sustainable debt is not a fixed number. It's a balance between growth, borrowing costs, and trust. Rich countries can borrow more because people trust their systems. Emerging countries like India have to earn that trust through discipline, through transparency, and consistency. For India, that means keeping the fiscal deficit under control, strengthening tax capacity, and ensuring that every borrowed rupee goes into building the future, not just funding the present. Because fiscal space, that is the ability to spend and invest, is not really something we inherit. It's something we earn through responsibility. And as the era of cheap money ends, the countries that treat debt as a tool for growth, not a cushion for comfort, will emerge stronger. India still has that chance to be one of them. Because in an age of borrowed time, the most valuable thing any nation can borrow is trust.